guest this week is Rebecca Clay Cole. Rebecca has been a member of several bands, including the Elephant Six band The Minders and Wild Flag, which also featured Carrie Brownstein, Mary Timony, and Janet Weiss. She's also been a touring member of Telekinesis, Pedro the Lion, and Pavement. She performs her own music as Clay Cole and is a multi-instrumentalist who principally plays keyboards, percussion, and drums. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome the Revolutions per Movie, Rebecca Clay Cole. Hi, Rebecca.
Hello. How are you, Chris?
I'm great. So good to see you.
It's great to see you. Thanks for having me on.
In the late 90s, I was not playing music anymore, but I dreamed about being asked to be in two bands. One was Guided by Voices, and the other was The Minders. I was obsessed.
Way.
Yes, you remember. I asked you to, be on compilations and things. I was at those shows in Portland, and, hooray for Tuesday, and is it Cul-de-sacs and Dead Ends, the compilation?
Mm-hmm.
It was Pollard-esque in terms of 7 inches galore and trying to keep up. And, I can't find this, but I heard that somebody found one in Utah and they're going to pick it up on tour. So I want to ask you, because The Minders was my first time where I got to meet you. What was your musical trajectory coming into that band? Had you been in other bands before? What was your training?
Well, The Minders was my first band, which I think makes me one of the luckiest people on earth. I
Wow. That is...
Yeah.
I didn't want to assume, right? Because I just all of a sudden you and Martin just appeared, right?
Just like magic. Magical pop sprites. I had taken piano lessons as a kid and had followed up with it, into my teenage years, and then hadn't played piano for a couple of years when I met Martin. And he was like, I'm starting this band. And if, I don't need a keyboard player, but I could use a drummer. And so he taught me a few basic beats, and I started playing drums in the Minders. And that's how I came to be in the Minders. And it was a great, great first band. It really spoiled me. Set a high bar. Was
Martin just letting you do whatever you want? Was he particular? Where were you in terms of being comfortable with just your own ideas being in these songs?
One of the things I really loved about working with Martin, from first 7-inch to last record we did together, was that he loved my ideas. It was both. He could be pretty particular. He could be like, no, the drums are like this. And usually his idea would win if it was a real headbutt, because it was he was singing over it. So you want him to be comfortable with it. But he gave me a lot of latitude. I mean, I did a ton of vocal arrangement and just arrangements in general. That was sort of where I got to hang my hat with his songs. And it was a great relationship that way. I learned so much about songwriting just from watching him get these kernels of ideas. And then he gave me free reign to script out parts for other instruments, or I remember borrowing a mellotron for the first time, just having all these ideas. And he was always game for whatever I wanted to try, which I really appreciated. It gave me a lot of latitude.
Well, it's incredible. It's your first band. Was that your first time singing as well then?
I sang in chorus. I sang in the choir in high school and middle school. I liked singing.
I was going to say, in the Elephant Six documentary, you say, I trusted my body to sing, to make the note I was hearing. So I kind of learned to sing not a lot of nuance there. And I still sing like that. But I will tell you, your voices together was, again, it was super magical. And I, as somebody who struggles with singing, finding harmonies, I just can't do it. I don't know how to do it. Was it just like that, where you're just this is what I feel like, and I'm just going to follow it?
Yeah. In the car in school, I'd be singing along to songs, with my mom's music, or even later with my music. And oftentimes if I couldn't sing along, let's say it's George Jones, I don't have a range of George Jones. I can't stay with his melodies. And so I would I would write a little part that I could sing along to the songs I liked. So I was writing my own harmonies from a young age, just because I had to, because of range.
Right.
So that's how I first really got into harmony singing. And I took chorus in school and sang along, just sang, into pens and hairbrushes or whatever all the time as a kid.
Classic. Me too. Yeah.
But it wasn't until Minders when I learned to sing on a mic. And so I was behind a drum set and, a lot of our shows, I didn't necessarily have a monitor, or if I did, it wasn't well tuned enough to get over my cymbals, noises to forget hearing yourself. And so that's why I was just like, I think I'm trusting this to be right. I'll just open up my jaw and hopefully my body knows what note it should be on and I'll get there.
It's amazing how much we couldn't hear ourselves in the 80s and 90s on stage. It just is. I was talking to someone about that. I was like, yeah, the sound checks were forever. And then you still couldn't hear it because there were 5 bands on the bill and the person doing sounds like, I don't care.
That's right. And I feel like I didn't know. Who knew, I know a little more now, but like volume doesn't translate to energy as much as I thought it did in my 20s either. So there's that factor. Like amps are up loud, I'm beating the shit out of my cymbals. Can I curse on here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. Beating the shit out of my cymbals.
Yeah.
They're loud. And, we're screaming into these SM57s like we, trying to do 4-part pop harmonies while like playing our amps up to like distortion level or whatever. Like,
and the poor sound people were like, we're like, yeah, I can't hear my vocals. They're like, yeah, there's a reason, morons. Come on, turn down. And we were like, no
way, man. Don't tell me how to do my show.
But it's so funny because like the recordings often were not like that. It was just, I don't know, maybe it was nerves.
I think it was nerves. I think it was, that was my first band. And so now that I've spent 30 years playing all kinds of different stages, I have seen what works and what doesn't work, and amp volume and certainly drum volume. It's like, it's really basic to say this out loud to you now in our like grown years, but like to just understand, like if you're in a coffee shop, your amp is going to be set different. You're going to attack the cymbals a little differently than if you're like on a big theater stage. And I don't think any of us really had that. So trying to do harmonies behind that, it was very hard to hear yourself. Sound checks I'm sure it was a drag for a lot of audio engineers back in the day. Well,
there's a reason why they didn't say much. They were just like, you could not get a conversation from a sound person. They're just like, let me get my job done. I'll be with you in a minute. You're like, where should I put this? They're like, hey, I'm working. Like, I hate to.
You're just like, want to practice. And they're just like, yeah, let me run these microphone lines, please. And I'm just like,
yes. Well, I'm so curious because I still can't name a lot of bands from Denver where the Minders came from. What did it feel like in that scene before connecting with like Elephant Six?
I had friends that were playing in bands. It never occurred to me that I should do that before I met the Elephant Six guys. I was just like, oh, you play the loud rock music with the lyrics I don't understand, and I support you, but this is not my thing. There was like this cowpunk kind of scene, and like a band like Slim Cessna's Auto Club was sort of like a huge band at the time, just cowpunk stuff. Seemed to be the like dominant flavor. And of course, in the late 80s, early 90s, grunge was happening everywhere. There was some version of that going on in that scene too. And then those were kind of the two main flavors that I'd see out and about. And then I had a job at a movie theater. I know you worked at a video store. My day job was, I was so ready to be a film projectionist to support my career in music, which was just, less money than my music career in the end. But anyway, I worked at this art house theater and I met a guy there named Bill Doss. And we got hired at the same time. He was in town recording Olivia Trimmer Control's first record with Robert. And so he introduced me to a lot of his friends. Martin started working at the theater a little bit later through Bill, and other people were just sort of clearing through. And so once I met those guys and went to see those shows, I realized for the first time in my life, oh, like you can actually put out good music. Like you can do it. You can make good music. You don't have to be Janet Jackson. You can just have a band. Like I'd never really seen it. I don't want to say good in this judgment, something that spoke to me. It was like, there was harmonies, there was choruses and verses and structures. It was pop. It was, the Apples were doing pop, pretty unabashed, joyful. And I had just never really seen that before. And I just immediately I decided I wanted to do that. I mean, and that was at a time too. I think Martin bought a reel-to-reel 4-track I mean, I know he did this. I just can't remember. I think it was like $50 or $100, you know? I mean, it's like the tools to do this were cheap. It was like a cheap, low entry situation, and you could really teach yourself kind of the basics of sonics. You know, pretty simply, much like today you can with GarageBand or something, where it's just like it's accessible. And so it's not a high barrier to start making your own music, which I think was a revolution a little bit at that time, because it felt very much like if you weren't in the studio with a budget like Fleetwood Mac, what are you even doing, you know? In terms of pop music or classics, you know, like we were all trying to write at the time.
It's fascinating, you know, in the Elephant Six documentary to see how much documentation there was. Like, not only was there a music scene, but there was like a vibrant art and filmmaking scene. It was the beginning of people cheaply having access to tools that people kind of didn't want anymore. And so people were cobbling together their own version of a Mellotron and, you know, making their own stage props and things like that.
And, you know, Martin is a painter. And he was trained as a visual artist. And so in our studio, and I had no language visually. I mean, I've learned a lot as I've gotten older, but I didn't come into that collective with much of a visual language at all. I loved film, you know, because I worked in an art house and got to see 5 to 10 movies a week as part of my job, which was, I mean, an education that I, you know, couldn't have paid for. And, but in terms of visual art, I didn't have much language, but Martin did. And so it didn't make it into our music as much, but he did do the covers, and we hand colored things and tried to put our own like personal visual stamp on it as much as we could. But also, I mean, someone like, I mean, I'll just, you know, Will Cullen Hart was a visual artist that was, you know, clearly like working from some like fresh perspectives. You know,
Right.
you see someone working like that. It's like, that is just a true master of like he's out on the balconies of space, time, and vision, and like pulling in some different stuff. And I think is wonderful. And you hear it in the music and you see it in the work. And I think Martin and I both are just a little more linear thinkers, a little more, I don't even want to say grounded, but just a little more literal.
But what made you gravitate towards Portland versus like Athens or other scenes that you could have easily been welcomed into?
It was a tough call. When we moved, you know, we signed a spin art and we got our budget. I mean, these are like quaint. It sounds so old fashioned when we get signed to an indie label and we got like 20 grand advance or something. And we were just like, we are rich, but we knew we had to do a lot with it. And we were living in this condemned corner of Denver that is now, I think, a parking lot. But I mean, we could see the writing on the wall that Denver was becoming unaffordable. And we had done a summer tour the year before, and we had gone to Portland. It was my first time in Portland. And we played a show. It was 4th of July at EJ's. And why is the name of the band escaping me right now? Saltzman was in it.
Oh, Sunset Valley.
Thank you. Sunset Valley. Sunset Valley was playing. And they were great. I mean, they were great.
They're incredible.
I mean, imagine a 4th of July show at EJ's. Sunset Valley's headlining.
Right.
And we show up and like fireworks and like, you know, it was such a great group of people. I was like, this is a great time. And then the next morning we went to Dots for breakfast, and I ordered my omelet with no cheese, and they took 50 cents off because I didn't get the cheese. It was just like every step of the way, it just seemed like, what a cool town, what a groovy place.
Yes.
And so Andrew Caffer, who had a band called Kissing Book, had come to Denver to record a record with Martin. And I guess, I don't remember how formal it was, but he was just sort of like, we're moving out of our house. Like, if you want a place to live in Portland, you can just take over our lease, which is what we did. And so it was just having this sort of easy slide in to a town that Martin and I were both pretty excited about. Athens was the other consideration. Mm-hmm. And I think life would have been really wonderful if I had moved there as well. Like, you know, it wasn't like, oh, I did the right thing, or, you know, Athens is awesome, but I am really glad that we ended up in Portland.
Yeah, no, I mean, I am too. Because it was all of a sudden, like, I was like, the Minders are here. I mean, it was just such a unique time. I mean, I don't want to go in the Wayback Machine too much, but
I'd go into your video store and Sam would be there. I think,
yeah.
and you just chat like, what's new up on the shelf.
Oh, it was great. I mean, I too worked in a movie theater with the Film Center, and it was you getting access to going to any movie theater in town. I just for years was again just the best. It was like I couldn't afford to do that, but it was just a real learning lesson. So it's cool that you got to experience that too.
Yeah, it was awesome.
So how does Rebecca Clay Cole enter the world of Pavement?
That's a lucky lottery ticket there. How did that happen? Well, Stephen Malkmus lived in Portland for almost as long as I lived in Portland and had the Jicks. And, I was friends with the Jicks. I had played music with Joanna and I was friends with, Janet, like all of the Jicks, prior, present, future. I probably, were my homies. And so, he was around and I kind of knew him. And then at some point, maybe like, I can't remember which Jicks record it was. I know I did 3 album cycles with them. As like the first couple, I was just slinging merch and just basically just like drinking wine at the merch table and smoking J's and having the best time, like watching like one of the best bands going. Yes. I'd get to see like just 30 Jicks shows every couple of years. So I was stoked. And then the last Jicks tour, I guess there might have been a little more hang time with Steven. I'm trying to like find this like seed moment of like, aha, but it wasn't really like that. It was more like, I actually asked him later, like, why me? And he did tell me that he'd just seen me play a ton of cover bands around Portland and figured I had the capacity to take on a massive catalog. And then, and just personality wise, he thought I'd be a good fit with the rest of the Pavement guys, which was true. I mean, I love all of them. That was a really good call for sure. And so that's how it happened. I think just like being around and unbeknownst to me, I was being considered for, the ride of my life.
Well, it's funny. As somebody who also got to, I joined Got Out by Voices and I had a role in it where, I was such a fan that if Bob was like, hey, we're going to do this song, it was my job to kind of help everyone learn the song, right? Because it'd been so long. Did you have a role in it? Since you're adding extra instrumentation and you're actually allowing some of the songs to be heard in a way that they couldn't do before as a 5-piece. I mean, did you ever have to kind of like become a bit of a wrangler in terms of, what they were trying to do? Because in the documentary Pavement, there's a lot of like, hey, what's that? No. You're, there's a bit of that weird early rehearsal vibe thing. And I just wondered like where your voice was in that.
Those guys came up. I wasn't sure what to expect. Like I'd seen Steven play probably 100 Jicks shows. And so I kind of knew his style and, what I could expect from him. But the other 4 guys I didn't know. And so I just wasn't sure what the vibe would be. Is someone getting pulled along? Like, is everyone rusty? And, from day one, all 5 of them showed up like really ready to go. Like there were some times where like, there were some times where it'd be helpful for me to like hang back and be like, I think that I'm playing an A. What are you playing? Something sounds minor. Are you playing a minor chord? Because I think it's major what I'm playing. Just sort of like little details. But I wouldn't say it was much wrangling because I think everyone really wanted it to sound good. There's a lot of that band is incredible. The energy between those dudes is really genuine. And they all 5 were very excited to be together. It was like coming out of the pandemic. We were all still testing for COVID very heavily when it was supposed to happen in 2020. And then it happened and, then it got 2021. And then when it finally happened in 2022, I think everyone in the room was really just so happy to be with their buds again, playing the tunes, that everyone had done a lot of homework. The one thing I think that I might have maybe helped out would be the background vocals. Because I just, like, if I'm singing, I want them to be in tune. Like, if I'm on the mic, I just want us all to sound really, good and in tune, singing kind of the same key and stuff. And so I think I was kind of very encouraging in that department of just like, well, what are you singing? Let's do, making sure that sounded pretty spot on. But honestly, everyone really did show up really ready and really excited. And it's a lot of songs. It was also a big relief for me to see them. They were nervous a little bit. They hadn't played together in all this time. It is a lot of songs to remember. And so I wasn't the only one who was just like, holy macamoly.
Yeah, they really did bring it on that tour. It was so funny when I was talking to Lance Bangs. We were just like, when they were making those records, we were like, they're the biggest band in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you look back on it, you're like, oh, they were always playing the Showbox in Seattle. It's like, 1800. But in my head, I was like, they're one of the hugest bands I know,
Yeah.
And so it's really funny to watch the film Pavements where they're like, it comes up at the beginning, like Pavement weren't recognized at the time. They didn't sell a lot of records. They were kind of unknown. And then now they are. And I'm like, what? Like, it's just, it does our head in collectively. Cause I'm like, no, they were massive, right? But they really weren't. Like, you step 2 feet outside of that circle and people are like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I've noticed it in the last few years. My mom is like bragging on me to her friends. They don't know. Like, nobody knows it. They're just, even, if someone's like, what band do you play in? It's like, even I probably won't play in a bigger band than Pavement in this lifetime, but it's like, I think you don't know it, but it's true. At the time, it definitely was like Guided by Voices, Pavement, maybe some Built to Spill, in there was just like 5 bands, Husker Du, you just had these like fence posts that you would track and like Pavement was definitely just like to us, right? The biggest ones. They were on MTV all the time. And, just like every festival, it just seemed like they were they were definitely living the life. But yeah, in Elephant Six, I mean, it's always so funny to think about. I ended up tour managing the last end of the reunion tour for Neutral Milk Hotel. And it was really beautiful to get to see those guys play big theaters and big rooms and big festival stages. They weren't doing that in the 90s.
But because everybody you knew had that record, you're like, in your head, you're building a world that is not based in reality. But that's kind of the power of, illusion in music.
Exactly. I mean, in both, they had both of those bands, Neutral Milk Hotel and Pavement, were, the 90s was like pre-internet. It's hard to find like a lot of footage, it's just not as documented a time. So it's easy. It's almost easier to backfill the story into like what it seemed like it could have been.
Right.
I mean, Pavement is still one of the biggest bands in the world in my head.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny. You're like, they put out 5 records. Not many bands get to do that. I'm like, on the same label? What? Right. You're like, they've got it figured out. Oh my gosh, it's so funny. Well, you picked the Luther Vandross documentary, Never Too Much.
Yes.
And it's really interesting. It was directed by Don Porter, who'd done a ton of documentaries, including Gideon's Army and John Lewis Good Trouble. Where did you first see this?
Well, I am a big Luther Vandross fan, so I follow his account on Instagram. And so they started mentioning this movie a long time ago. I mean, whenever a year ago, who knows what time is. But and then as it was coming out, I mean, it was out before I realized it was out, but I saw on Instagram that it was out and I thought, oh, I really want to see that because I think he's one of the best singers ever.
Oh my God.
I mean, he's just one of the best.
There's no doubt.
Best vocalists to ever live. And so I wanted to see it. And then when you asked me to do this, I thought, oh, great. Like, I want to see that. That's on my list of things to make time to do. And I bet if I say I'll do it for this podcast, I'll actually watch it. And then I went back and listened to some episodes and realized sometimes people come on here to talk about these really formative movies, and I thought, oh shit, like I should have done Live at Pompeii. Like that's my formative text, Luther is great, but I wouldn't call it like formative or, but I really wanted to see it. And that's why I picked it. Cause I just thought, I wonder if that's good. She's a great director and he's a great subject. So
it is. I mean, what's interesting about it is some people have picked these films that are done by CNN Films. They have a certain look, CNN Films. This is not going to have an animated sequence. This is not going to have any wild artistry in terms of telling the story of Luther Vandross. It is going to be all about stories. And the one good thing about this film, like I said, it's very cut and dry visually, but there's such an incredible story to tell about him. And, at the end of the film, I'm just going to start with the end of the film. His longtime bass player, Marcus Miller, says, if you hear Aretha, you know who we're talking about. If you hear Marvin, you hear a sound in your head. Stevie, you definitely hear a few sounds in your head. And if you say Luther, we know exactly what you're talking about. That is rare air. And
Yes.
Of course, he deserves a documentary because, as we'll get into it, talk about somebody who was all over things you love that you may not even have realized.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, it took this long. Yeah, he passed a while ago.
He did.
And it was quite a while until we got this, which I think is an interesting time lapse there. What happened with that? Why wasn't he was huge? He's been huge, but it took 20 years to get the documentary. So I'm glad we got it. But it is one of those things of it's why isn't this the third documentary?
Well, that's the thing is you realize sometimes there's only going to be one shot at telling the story, and it can be frustrating. You're like, okay, they really missed it. No one is going to make this is such an obscure artist, or they just kind of went about it and it's frustrating. But when but the great thing about this documentary is, it's really about the people he surrounded himself with, that from it being a child to the age when he died. There you're talking about Fonzi Thorton, who was a background singer, was part of Chic when he was part of it, and then you've got Robin Clark, who also sang with him, and they were, he'd just be like, come over, we're gonna watch the Supremes, or we're gonna listen to records. And then Carlos Alamor, who is one of my heroes, guitar player on all the Bowie albums you love, Lodger, Station to Station, Scary Monsters, Young American. That's him. And one of my favorite things in the video store was him performing with Iggy Pop in 1981 in San Francisco. And it's such a loaded 3 guitar players, right? Gary Valentine from Blondie, Rob Dupree, and then Carlos Alamor comes out with a ski mask on, out of the gate, just playing behind Iggy, who's in bikini briefs, right? And you're like, this guy rules. I love him. And what's so great is that they're kids who are drawing Supremes on their books in high school. One thing they don't mention in the film is that Luther ran the Patti LaBelle fan club.
Didn't he founded it, right?
Yes, he did the first one. And I love that he was obsessed with music, which that's how things happen. You meet people because you're obsessed with music, and you meet young people who have the same obsessions, and you dream. You're like, maybe someday we could do something. But I love that the thread of the 3 of them is constant through his life and through this film.
I really thought that was special. And the way they introduced them early on, and they're the thread of the movie for us in this way. It's they're with us from the start, of the narrative of the film, and at the, through to the end. And so you really feel and you do actually get this kind of if you can't hear it from Luther himself, this is going to be the most reliable narrator. And we have it in triplicate with them, which is amazing.
Yeah. And they're so excited to just be hearing what's on the radio and being obsessed. Luther's obsessed with Aretha Franklin, who he works with later. He's obsessed with Dionne Warwick, who he works with later. It's just so cool when, hey, you got to be in Pavement. I got to be in Guided by Voices. Not the same thing. Early on, he forms a band with Fonzi, Carlos, and Luther's in it called The Shades of Jade. And I love this story because it just shows when you're young what's important. And what's important to him? The uniform. You got to have patent leather green emerald shoes. No one has the money to have $23 to buy it. But Luther goes over to everyone's house and talks to the parents and convinces them to give their children $23 in the early 60s so that they can form this band. It's beautiful.
It's amazing. Shades of Jade. When I didn't know that before watching the movie. I mean, and as soon as I heard it, I just gasped. And then when they showed the picture of the shiny patent leather green shoes, it's like, yeah, like I could so relate to that. It's like, what were they at this time? Like 18, 19? They're kids. They're teenagers at this point, right? Like,
yeah.
They're
like, I've never had $23 to spend on anything. It's a fortune. And I just love that. And, later in the film, they talk about him designing costumes for the shows he was putting on. He put a lot of his own money back into these shows to make it really professional, to just make it a constant show, a large band, a lot of costume changes. It's just really lovely. But you do need someone when you're young who's like, we're going to do this. You have to have one person who's going to be like, we're actually going to make a record, or we're actually going to tour, or we're going to wear emerald green shoes.
We're going to be called Shades of Jade. Let's go. Let's get our moms to get us the shoe money. It's going to be worth it. I'll talk to them. Just picture their conversation. He's like, I'll talk to them.
Have you ever had a stage outfit?
No, not in the way that one goes in the wardrobe case every night. In fact, like, I'm kind of lazy. I mean, I say that I'm lazy with my stage wear. Truthfully, most of my touring has been done in vans, and it's just not a thing in my little indie rock world anyway to like be stylish. And I kind of came up at a time where it was like, fuck fashion, don't look at me, listen to me sort of an attitude. And I still am like that a little bit. Playing with Pavement was nice. I actually started for the first time, like on one of the runs, the tour manager was like, of course you would pick the one that we're flying all over for a month. It was like Japan and Australia. But I decided I was wearing like a different dress every single night. Yeah. And I did. And it was really fun, mostly just for me to just pull out all this stuff out of my closet. And fun for the guys. Like I'd walk into the backstage for the show and it would be a surprise. What is Rebecca going to be wearing today?
Oh, that's killer.
And it was pretty fun, actually. And because I did that, I did find some pieces that I'm like, wow, this dress travels well, looks great photographed. I feel really comfortable playing in it. And like, so now, decades later, I am starting to appreciate like, that's like, maybe there is some stage wear ready to peek out. I mean, but look, nothing like what we saw in this documentary. I mean,
oh my gosh.
The sparkles, the spangles, the like leaf shaped sequins, the sweater era that he had where it was just sparkle sweaters.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like you watch it and you're like, people would pay big dollars for that sweater right now.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I would.
Yeah, totally. And it's funny. It's like, where are they? Why aren't these available? Like, they're so like the time is right, people. A part of his life I didn't know, which again had, Carlos in it and Robin and Fonzi and Luther, was this early band called Listen, My Brother, which was a 15-piece band that the Apollo Theater people managed. So they would get on a lot of shows. Again, their outfits are very simple, but the colors are incredible. Lime greens, pinks, blues, and of course, who sees them? Jim Henson, and is like, I want you to be on this thing I'm doing, Sesame Street. I had not seen that footage of them singing the alphabet or teaching you how to sing to 20. Had you seen that before?
It's funny. I had known that and forgotten it.
Okay.
Because it's like one of the most badass facts about Luther is that he, as a teenager, was on the premiere episode and several other episodes of Sesame Street. He was handpicked by Jim Henson to launch Sesame Street. That's
so killer.
That alone could be a career. Like, good, you're done with life. That's amazing. And he's just getting started at this point. And I love their costumes, and they looked so great on set at Sesame Street, but that's what they looked like at the Apollo too. Like, just their look was so of the time and so perfect for like, this kids show set on the Harlem street, it's great.
And then, they start kind of getting involved in the Philly sound. They'd been huge Motown fans. And at this point, they're like, we're kind of getting into like OJ territory. We want something a little grittier, a little shoutier. That footage of the OJs and they're like, like Ace really stole from it. There's no way this Shazam outfit, like they looked incredible.
Incredible. And like the journalist Danielle Smith had a great quote that I actually wrote down because it made me laugh so hard when she was talking about, she was like, Motown was a little about gowns.
Yes.
Philly sound was like, show up as yourself. And then she said, Motown was giving you, we're matching and we're home by midnight.
Yes.
The implication is like, Philly's getting funky way later than that.
Yes, which is true. Philly, there's nothing like Philly. Like still, you're like, we're playing Philly. What's going to happen tonight? It's going to be something always interesting happens at a Philly show. But of course, that's where David Bowie wants to get, that's where he's starting to listen to the sounds and he's transitioning into the Thin White Duke era. Again, one of the things I love about music documentaries are just about life, especially with the arts, is just chance encounters. Mm-hmm. It's so much of the great things is I was on a bus next to somebody and then they had records and we became the Rolling Stones. I'm on an airplane and the person I'm sitting next to is reading a Fassbinder book and they make Hedwig and the Angry Inch. Those kind of things, just proximity, just standing next to people and being like, oh, who are you? You seem interesting. Again, David Bowie asked Carlos Alamor to come in and start working on Young Americans. And he's like, I know somebody who's really a good singer. My friend Luther. You should bring him in. He's brilliant on that record because he is the arranger of that entire record, along with David Bowie, vocal arrangements. So all the stuff you hear and love in Young Americans, the back and forth, I read the news today, a boy, all that stuff. That's Luther, like just blowing David Bowie's mind in real time.
I love that section of the movie so much because you're right. It is one of those things of like music is chance, but it's also like be ready for your chance. And I think this is just such a great example of that, of just like he had the skills, and he was comfortable enough to share some of those ideas. And, I think he says in the movie, he didn't realize Bowie was listening. He was just like, hey, listen, Robin, what if we did this? He didn't know that Bowie was standing behind him.
I know.
I mean, that probably changed his life in such a profound way. Just having that one idea that he sang to a friend and Bowie happened to hear it. And it's like, you're going to do all the songs now. And in fact, we're going to rework a song that you wrote.
I know.
And I'll sing it. And we'll call it Fascination because I can't say Funky Town. I mean.
I know. Incredible. Because I'd always seen the footage of him performing on the Dick Cavett show where they're doing like, foot stomping, like before it became fame. And you're like, oh, Luther Vandross is part of this. But then the footage they have in this, the black and white footage, which is from a film called Cracked Actor, of David and Luther working on the material together. Mm-hmm. Like, give me 90 minutes of that.
I agree.
Please. But one of the things I really like when I see films about David Bowie is he does seem like he loves collaboration and he loves listening. Like he's open to ideas, which is sometimes really rare in the world of recorded music. And then it's just kind of amazing. He's off to the races. He's touring with Bette Midler. He's written a song in The Wiz. He's in Chic.
That part is so crazy to consider.
I didn't know that because like one of the first 45s I ever bought was Le Freak. And it's still a pivotal moment in my mind. In junior high, they had a co-ed PE class that was just dancing. And we would do country dancing, waltzes, whatever. But one day was disco. And I had this asshole of a PE teacher named Mr. Devine. But I remember when they put this on in the gymnasium, he was so excited that he leaped into the air and spun around in front of a bunch of 7th graders. Who are you trying to impress? Like, it's still one of the, like, just a young memory. But I loved Chic. And yeah, He's all over the record. I just didn't know.
Yeah, it's so crazy. I mean, I didn't know something I didn't get that I didn't catch even until I watched this movie was that, well, they were doing that because Nile Rodgers was playing in the band with Luther.
Yes.
And they were on breaks from recording they were opening for someone at Radio City. They were opening for Marvin Gaye.
That's right.
So Nile Rodgers was playing in the band for Luther while he was opening for Marvin Gaye at Radio City. And they would, on their break, run over and cut what came to be the first Chic. I mean, it's crazy. That's crazy.
Like Chic is a unit. It's like a machine. We slot people in and out. There's a visual identity that's Chic, but also there's the mechanisms that make Chic. And he's like, Luther is on every single track on the first record. Luther is on every single track on the second record. Every single. And I'm like, okay, hold on. In a funny way, he still has this background role, but he's like, I just want to do my own thing. But he still has to make money. He sings jingles. Again, once I heard these commercials with his voice in it, I'm like, Juicy Fruit, Miller Time, Lowenbrow. I'm like, I remember these commercials. Yeah. I remember this voice. And also that he comes into being through a Gino's Pizza ad.
I love that story. Sizzling hot. That was amazing. That is amazing. Gino's Pizza gave us Solo Luther.
One of the nice things about the film is, they're like, the producers who are doing the jingle are like freaking out once they hear him do it, because they just say, like, give us something, like, give us something that's hot, right? And he does this thing. They're freaking out. And then they cut to the actual person being like, yeah, we were back there. I produced this commercial and we were freaking out. Like, it's really, it's like, it's just not hearsay. It's like, they're like, oh no, you don't understand. We were losing our minds, but we also knew he's not doing this anymore. Like, this is the end. As much as he was making on those commercial checks that they talked about, he's like, I'm going to start to try to pull my career together. And it's kind of the beginning of that.
Mm-hmm. I think that's right. Because then the next thing they cut to, isn't it, he was out with Roberta Flack?
He says he was fired for just being a little too good, and she was like, hey, I think you need to make your own record. You don't need to be relegated to the stool and singing oohs and ahs. But I also can't imagine anyone saying that to someone who's that good. Being like, oh, you know what? You're too good. It's just a funny story. And so when they cut to her being like, I never fired him. I think they're both probably the truth in both of their stories.
I think you're right. It's like, I mean, because there is that sense of like, he wouldn't have let that gig go.
You just don't let go of an asset, like that musically.
No.
You just don't. Even if they're a horrible person, people are like, you're staying in the band because, And
even if you want them to do a solo thing, it's like, go do the solo thing and then, but don't tour in March, April, or May because we're going to be out or something. But no, she pushed him or so he says, I do wonder. We'll never know.
So this is the period where we as kids are hearing Luther on AM radio, which that was my life. The sweet period of, 78 to 81, America's Top 40, I was obsessed with the countdown and like just buying singles. And, you'd be like, I'm buying Whip It and Minute by Minute by the Doobies at the same time. Like, it just didn't matter. You're just like, they're both here. I can't tell if one's better than the other. Where did you first hear him?
Well, I mean, I didn't realize at the time I was hearing him in Chic or, whatever. But, my exposure to him was my mom. She loved him. So it was like Mom's in the kitchen or it's Saturday. We're cleaning the house, opening the windows, playing, Luther and Change, and he's singing that Change record got played. And of course, this is the first solo record. So that was how I got exposed to it, was like my mom loving the music so much.
I was so frustrated because there's an album that came out like 81, 82 called Busybody. Do you know that record? Mm-hmm. It's great for two reasons. One is that it's a very new wave synth driven record. It sounds like Oh No, It's Devo era, like 80s synth pop. But it's also got this like 70s like very, staccato synthesizers. And I play it all the time now whenever I do a DJ show. I do house shows called Couches where I DJ and I just throw records one at a time on their turntables and throw them on the couch when I'm done. But that album always hits. But the other cool thing that's on the record that they talk about in the film is his 9.5-minute version of Superstar.
Oh, I know.
So that's on this record.
That you're couch DJing?
Yeah, I don't put that on usually, but it's on that record and it closes it out. And I love Superstar. His version is so funny because it's the it's like the longest version of Superstar. But I highly recommend that record, Busybody. I think it's a really killer sleeper record.
Great. Okay.
What was interesting in the film was just if you wanted to sell records, white artists were getting 3 times the amount of promotion. They were in different parts of the record store. And it's true. I just, like when I go back to like going into Django's or Dudley's or whatever, it was like, yeah, soul R&B over there. And over here's rock.
Totally. I was thinking about that when they mentioned that in the movie. I was trying to remember like walking into a Tower Records and trying to call it back in my memory of just like even chain stores. I feel like you'd walk past, whatever 80s, bands, and then you'd walk past to R&B, and you would find Whitney Houston and Luther Vandross there, but they wouldn't be necessarily up in the very front. At least I was remembering that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of the things that's interesting about the film is that Luther, he just was frustrated. He was like up for Grammys 9 times, just couldn't win. Finally did, but like between people wanting to just obsess about his weight and the struggles he had with that, and that being the lead off to an interview, like, oh, you look really great. You lost, how much did you lose?
Yeah.
And him having to be like, I lost 120 pounds, and him being really kind about it. It was just kind of sad, like how often people were just wanting to talk about, you've put a little back on. Oh, not a lot, but yeah, and joking about it. It's just incredibly cruel.
It's so, even the first time it's mentioned in the movie is when he's on Sesame Street.
Yes.
And I can't remember I don't remember which of those guys said it, but it was like, hey, he was the best singer, but he wasn't the leader. And that was just down to he's too big and too black to be in the front,
Yes. Carlos says that.
Yeah. So, it's like, because it's mentioned that early in his career that he's aware that he's, up against one for trying to be a leading man. I suspect it's one of the reasons he stayed back as long as he did, being background vocalist for all these other artists. It's just like so much easier to just get that steady paycheck at a job he's great at. He gets to collaborate with all of these amazing people and not have to go up front. And as soon as he does, you're right. It's like the weight becomes the topic. And I remember Eddie Murphy making that joke about him. I didn't remember that he clapped back and brought fried chicken bucket out on stage and sang a fried chicken jingle as a way to kind of reclaim the joke about him. But it is so sad. It's just really, we can say this about so many artists, most of them, Black artists, just like I'm sure he could see the structures that were working against him. He was aware and just refusing to be bitter, I guess, at least publicly. And if he did say anything bitter in public, they left it out of the CNN documentary, but just kind of keeping it positive. And he did, in his career, he did just was okay. I'm going to become undeniable. When it be like how, Jamie Foxx said, he just kept working it. I thought it was one of the interesting choices I think Don Porter made, and I noticed it, was that I think there's at least 4 different Oprah interview segments interspersed throughout the movie. And I thought that was a really clever way to sort of, you can't think of Oprah without thinking about weight struggle. And so I think that was kind of an interesting thing that they did there to just sort of maybe even reinforce how much of a cross that might have been for him to bear, and with his health, which clearly this is what did him in, he was struggling, mightily. as has she in the public, and has been ripped apart and has been flattened into this
Absolutely.
joke when she's Oprah Winfrey. It's like, and even for herself, like having to struggle with it in the public eye the way he did. They both of them very publicly struggled with their weight at a time when society was very cruel about it. I mean, it still is cruel, but it was even worse then than it is now in certain ways.
But you're absolutely right. It was news, right?
I mean, imagine you sit down on a televised interview and it's like, we're going to go right here every time. Or I think at one point they mentioned in the movie, like they'd made an album rollout about his weight loss. Like that was the story of the album rollout, but the stress of it had him gaining some weight. And so then it's like, for someone with an eating disorder, this has to just be a nightmare to live. To just have to talk in public and calm and collected in a way about something that doesn't have anything to do with the art you're promoting.
There's definitely a sadness in a lot of the documentary. There's a big focus on his lack of feeling loved. He has a personal assistant, Max. There was a song called Any Love that was a big hit for Luther. And he's like, I hate that song. Because the desperation in that song was so real for Luther. He wasn't seeking love. He was seeking any love. And it's heartbreaking.
Sad. I can't remember which person said when you think about Luther, you think about love. I think it was his niece. It's like, it's impossible to think about him and not think about love. He's just like, of course, he wrote all these love songs. And, helped a lot of people's love making along the way, I'm sure. And still does, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But just this idea that he didn't have it and really wanted it and never got it. Never found it, which is a heartbreak. It really is sad. And I liked how the film handled the question of his sexuality. Actually, I really liked this part of it. I thought it was well done. They showed that clip of Patti LaBelle, which, if I'm not mistaken, that was the first time anyone ever publicly outed him. Was that clip of her talking? I might be wrong, but I feel like that's right. That she did that, but like after he passed. But his friends were like, why would you? He never would have addressed like that. Like that was so rude. And you could see them in the movie not wanting to like hide anything, but just sort of like, I just want to go with what he would have said. And then, they do this deft cut of him saying, mind your own business. And I was thinking when I watched it, like, what if Luther Vandross was born 20 or 30 years later? Like, pop stars can be, all along a sexual spectrum now and still be pop stars. There's a lane for it that definitely, and one of them mentioned his mom, but then of course I hadn't really considered the fact that he was such a heartthrob. When they cut to that Oprah audience where he's singing and like these women are crying, they're standing up, they're like falling over, they're freaking out. And it's like, yeah, right. I can see where he, being the shrewd, like eyes on the prize, sort of business-minded cat that he was, like definitely was like, I want my number one, and I want my Grammy, I want my respect that I'm due. And like, I can see where he would just be like, there's no way it's even an option for something like that to come in. Like, it makes sense. I get it, and it was the 80s. I get it.
At one point he says, what I owed you is my talent, my music, and my best effort. Mind your effing business.
It's so good.
Yeah, it's just like that someone has to say that, who's like a massive platinum star. It's really, I think that's one of the most powerful things in this film, is just looking at why and how this happened, why this was allowed to happen, and for so long, because he did control. As much as there are lovely things in it, like him, I love the part where they're talking about how he talked to the band on stage and he'd be like, keep it right there.
Oh, I love that. That was so good. Play it easy.
And they're like, that means we're wanting to kind of vamp it up. And he's like, no. It's like, I just feel like he really knew how. I just feels like people were protective of him and loved him and continued to work with him over and over for decades. So I do agree with you. I think that in this film they're like, Luther's not here to talk about this. We're not going to speculate what he would want us to say for him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is the power of having his trio of friends.
Yeah.
Who their friendship came even before music, and it was there all the way to his deathbed. They were there when he was dying, you know?
Yeah.
And so again, it's not an artistic achievement, this documentary, but I feel like it really showed a lot that I didn't know about him, and also just how lonely and painful it can be when you're still a household name.
Right. When, adoration of, 10 Grammy nominations, like millions of adoring fans, producing records for your idols. Like, hi, he's producing Aretha Franklin records. He's producing Patti LaBelle records. Like,
right.
He started her fan club. Yeah. And then he was producing her record.
I know. I love it. And the cool thing is when he's on the piano looking up at Dionne Warwick and she's looking at him, oh my God, he's so happy. Whenever he is around his heroes, like Stevie Wonder and him, Aretha Franklin and him, he's just, it's so cool because you're like, you just know how much it meant to him. He was freaking out. Like, how did I get here?
It's so great. I love, what part really choked me up too is when he sang A House Is Not a Home and Dionne Warwick is like watching him do it, and you see the tear from her eye, and it's like, and he really was going for it, at that performance. But, and just like knowing that he moved her to that when she moved him to be up there, like she was a catalyst for him being up there in the first place. Like that's really artistic achievement, to me. Like that would be, what else is there to say with your artistry if you're able to move the ones that moved you to that place?
Absolutely. And it's beautiful. She says he made the definitive version of my song. That version of House Is Not a Home is great too, because it's one of the few times in the film where it just really, you stay with Luther on a longer passage of him performing. Mm-hmm. And you get the sense of just how he doesn't know where he's going to go in it. It's very improvisational in terms of like, I'm going to go up here with this gear. I'm going to play around with it this way. I'm going to slow it down, speed it up. It is intense, like the vocal gymnastics he's doing, but making it sound like a conversation, like with someone that you're close to instead of like a show off. That right. It's like, I'm so glad that this was in this film. Yeah,
he's just one of the best to ever do it. Like he really can be so himself, so at ease. I mean, he came up with that just off the top of his head and recording a jingle. What?
I know.
Like it's just so easy with it, But yet you see that he put in a lot of work and time and care into the rest of it to make sure that it matched, the artistry that his voice provided. It's really, I love that moment in the film because I think if you don't know much about him and you just know he's a good singer, and I'm a background singer, because that's mostly how I sing on stage, is to support other people's singing. And so of course I love to see him stepping out and doing a lead thing. Just as a fellow like harmony singer, it's like, go up there. But then it's also this thing of like the control he had over his art. Like it was good that they put that in the film so you could really see him flex it, like you were saying. I feel like the other clips were a little shorter. And if you didn't know much about him, like that is a good opportunity to kind of sit with his like process for a full minute and really watch it. Because anyone who's tried to sing, even if it's just la la la's on a mic, what he is doing is beyond. Like the control and the facility that says nobody. I mean, it's beyond. It's really amazing. And he's not showboating. He's just singing like Luther. Incredible.
Rebecca, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was great to see you. I always ask the same question at the end of the show, but I tailor it depending on what we're talking about. So, on a scale from 1 to 15. How many pairs of patented emerald green shoes that he's giving to his bandmates would you give this documentary, Luther Never Too Much, on a scale of 1 pair of patented emerald green shoes to his bandmates to 15 pairs, which was how many people were in his initial band?
That's right. I think I would give it like 12 pairs.
That's exactly what I have here, 12 pairs.
I think it's a 12 pairs movie.
Yes.
There could have been different choices, whatever. But like overall, I really loved it. I really loved getting to know him. And I think that the movie does a really good job of putting his personality out there, and his friends never step on it, with their own revisionism. And I really appreciated seeing that a lot. So 12 shoes, 12 pairs.
Absolutely.
24 shoes, 12 pairs.
We're going to look sharp. And then, you know what? I'll get a pair. You get a pair, and we'll give one other to Malcolmus, and then that'll be 15.
I would like to see Steven in some green patent leather shoes, actually, with his tennis shorts. Maybe I'll see him this week. Maybe I'll gift him a pair.
It was so good to see you, Rebecca. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me, Chris. It's been a blast.
Thank you for listening to Revolutions Per Movie. We release new episodes every Thursday on your favorite podcast app and additional bonus episodes every Sunday on our Patreon. The show is a completely independent affair, so the best way to support the show is through our Patreon at patreon.com/revolutionspermovie, where you can get weekly bonus episodes and shows, exclusive limited edition flexi discs and records and CDs featuring guests that have appeared on the show, and other exclusive goods sent to you just for joining. You can follow us on social media at Revolutions Per Movie, and also find out more information about our various guests in the episode show notes. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week. Bye!